Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're through to the Islamic Vibes podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I have with me my co-hosts, Brother Rash, Brother JK, and Brother Afi. How are you doing, brothers?
Alaikum.
Alhamdulillah, walaikum salam. You're right.
Wa alaikum salam. I did actually have a little complaint from the last podcast. No, actually not the last one, the one before that. Some eagle-eyed viewer noticed that I gave you guys salam and you guys didn't respond, so I was pretty upset about that.
Well spotted. Wa alaikum salam, just in case.
Yeah, backdated, yeah.
Indeed.
Subhanallah, guys. But yeah, listen, it's the last podcast anyway in the month of Ramadan. I don't think we'll be doing one unless something major comes up which we need to speak about. It's kind of crazy because we are literally in now the last week and a bit of Ramadan 2022. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we always say it's gone quick. I guess you guys are just gonna say the same as me, but it's just felt like it's just flown by.
I think last year I said that. I think because we get older, things feel like they go quicker. So I don't know if it's that again, but maybe. But yeah, it definitely has. But I won't labor that point.
Yeah, no, of course, man. But it's been good. I think it really has allowed you to appreciate small things like Taraweeh Salah, being at the masjid. I know JK mentioned it in the first podcast we did. Being back in the mosque, shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, depending on what opinion you follow, and just being back in that environment. And you look at 2 years ago. And now, you think about that Ramadan was kind of weird. There were plus points to it. You was at home with the family and there were certain things, you're reading Taraweeh with the family and stuff. But the hustle and bustle in the Taraweeh out with the brothers from all over the world, you know what I mean? It's just something which, until you don't miss it for a little, you don't really appreciate it. And I think that's been a really good experience for me anyway. I'm sure it's been the same for you guys as well.
Definitely, yeah. A couple of different things that I've really enjoyed this year is I've been going to 2 different places for Taraweeh. One place, what they do 8 there, and after the 4, they do like a 10 minute like lesson. What was just said in Arabic. They'll give a few sound bites and detail about the translation, tafsir, and a message really, and with a captive audience. Especially because the messages have been really good, both from a iman building point of view, but also from a political dimension about what's happening in the world. I think more places need to do that. You've got an audience, you need to get the right message across. That's at one of the mosques I've been going to, or one of the prayer places I've been going to. And then the other one, after the Taraweeh, then the Imam, he goes through the tafsir of what he's been covered in the juz that day. So again, that was really good as well. So again, I think maybe this used to happen in the past. I didn't come across it as much before, but in this year, there's been more of it. And long may it continue, because I think that kind of thing's really important.
I think what they've done in the past, what I've noticed is after the 4, that's when they say, okay, who's going to pledge $1,000 and who's going to pledge $2,000 and stuff like that. So they've kind of got you. It's a bit like a builder where, he starts your work and then he disappears halfway through doing other people's jobs and you're further chasing him. So, but it's because they got you,
and they're not, and you're not allowed to carry on the Taraweeh until they've raised a certain amount.
That's what I'm saying. So, but that's a really good idea. And inshallah, encourage, all mosques should be doing this. It's a bit of reflection. You're not just there. Obviously you get a bit of a rest as well. That's good for the younger people. But that's what it's about, bro, changing things. And this sort of leads into the kind of topic I want to speak about, because when you speak to people about Ramadan, one thing there's a kind of consistent theme is there's talk about change. There's talk about this is the month of like barakah, it's the month of forgiveness. And also, people talk about it's the month where the shaitan is locked up. So if you do things, bad things, it's off your own back. But all of these things are geared towards that you need to change. You have an opportunity to change. And what we see is, subhanAllah, the blessings of Ramadan is, in the month of Ramadan, people do change. They change a lot of habits, whether it's something as small as people cut down on cigarettes. Some people might even stop cigarettes. Other people will start praying salah more. Others might start praying in the masjid more. But what we see is we definitely see a change in people. But the one thing that I think is the difficult thing, really, I want to speak about really with you guys is kind of maintaining it after Ramadan, because what we see is, people do kind of drop off after Ramadan. Those people that were praying Taraweeh, standing there for hours, have stopped praying 5 times Salah. Other people who are praying in the masjid for a month will only go when they need to. Everyone's different, but what you do see where there's, a bit of a reverse rather than moving forward, whilst the way we probably should see it is, if we're going to measure, is to think, how have I improved this Ramadan, and then build that to the next Ramadan and try to move forward. Well, what's your thoughts on it, JK? What do you think?
Yeah, I think firstly, it's natural for us to increase our good deeds in Ramadan. So I think it's important not to downplay that it's natural. Like all of us would have read more Qur'an.
We would
have done more da'wah.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
No. I'm not saying you are. I think it's just a natural, and that we should appreciate that, the fact that we're all sinners. We need Allah's mercy. We need Allah's forgiveness, and Ramadan is the prime moment, the best month of the year for us to really return back to Allah. Not only in seeking forgiveness from Allah, but also increasing our deeds because of the barakah and the blessing of the month, really. And not only in our own individual activities of tilawah and salah and charity and whatever it may be, or not charity, but more sadaqah or zakah, also in other efforts in dawah, speaking about Islam, raising more awareness about the plight of the Muslims in the world and how we change that situation. All of that is in line with doing more good deeds for our sake, on the day of judgment as well, where we're going to be accountable for our actions. So I think it's natural. Even if you look back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they themselves increased their actions in Ramadan. The battles, the monumental battles that took place, many of them took place in the month of Ramadan. Their deeds went up. Obviously, even the Taraweeh was introduced at that point as well, the Qiyam al-Layl and all of that. So it's natural, right? So I think that's one point, that we will obviously do more in Ramadan, and it's also natural that it will slow down a little bit after Ramadan, right? But the key point is this, that we shouldn't return to disobedience in Ramadan after Ramadan. What I mean by that is the Sahaba, who we try to emulate and follow, it wasn't as though they went and started doing the fara'id during Ramadan. They were doing the fard before that. They were doing the requirements of Islam before that, right? In Ramadan, they went on to do the recommended actions, do more of the sunnah, the things that would give them more good deeds. They upped that, right? So I think that's really important. I know Ramadan might be a month for many who have lived a life of sin, done a lot of bad, and they want to turn it around, and Ramadan is often that month. And I think that is really positive to see, those wannabe gangsters or whoever they are, a lot of people that may have sinned and want to return back to Allah. Ramadan is often that month where they do that, and I think that's good. But I think it's mainly about maintaining that after Ramadan, because why are you doing it? You're not worshipping Ramadan, you're worshipping Allah, and Allah is to be worshipped in every month, not just Ramadan, right? So if you're doing it for that sake, then why wouldn't you want to carry that on? And look, we're going to slip and fall in certain bits, and we're going to sin, and that's natural. But I think the main thing, as you said, is that we should recognize that if we have made a good change in Ramadan, if we're doing more even in the recommended acts, how do we maintain that going forward as much as possible? I think one of the issues we have, however, is that Ramadan often makes it easier, not just because the shaitan is locked up, but also because the environment is better. And the environment influences us, right? So the fact that everyone is going to Taraweeh, everyone is going to Jama'ah, we're doing iftar together, and we're reminding each other of Allah and the Messenger and our duties. All of this makes the environment really easy to do good, right? And I think it's important to continue that environment outside of Ramadan, to carry on going to the mosque, carry on giving dawah. When you're seeking forgiveness, not forgiveness just for your individual acts of sin, but also, you know, the collective sin of the ummah. Understand that. What do we need to do as a ummah in you know, as a whole? So I think that's kind of my reflections on it. I think it's natural to kind of do more in Ramadan and it to fall away slightly, but I think it's important that we don't go back to an act of disobedience or kind of use Ramadan as just being that month in which we did good and then we go back. I think that there's a saying of Kabi bin Malik who said that, to paraphrase, that if the, you know, the one who does the good actions in Ramadan but has an intention to return back to sin, like has a niyah that when this month is over, I'm going to go back to sin and disobedience, that person's Ramadan is not accepted. You know what I mean? So if we've got that intention to go return back to sin, our Ramadan isn't accepted. So what's the point? Why did we even do all of that? So that's really important. You know, that's a prominent Sahabi. So it's an advice from a Sahabi that we need to have that intention to carry on, even after Ramadan, carry on with our good acts.
Yeah, and you mentioned environment, and you mentioned the collective, and this is probably, you know, a good place to bring in either the Afi or Rashis jump in if you you know, when you feel like it, that even when we're talking about change and stuff like that, obviously it starts from the individual. However, what we see is, subhanAllah, you mentioned environment and the collective change. So you see how when the environment changes for the better, this has an impact on the individual, right? And when the environment turns for the worse, this has an impact on the individual. However, as Muslims, you know, we can't be, you know, thinking purely as an individual, because if the ummah is not changing for the better, then I won't change. You understand what I'm trying to say? It's not possible for me to say that I've changed, but the ummah has gone worse or stayed at the same level, right? Yeah. It goes hand in hand. However, that's a really good point, that when we look at this change, we shouldn't be looking at it as individual change. We should be looking at it as a change of in the ummah, as an ummah. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, you're right. I think we are at a greater disadvantage because, you know, Islam isn't applied anywhere in the world. We know that, and you know, with that comes challenges. But living in a society which is not predominantly Muslim, the social system isn't even based upon Islam, gives us a greater disadvantage, because we've got to force ourselves to get into an environment or create an environment which is conducive to what we're talking about. And in parts of the Muslim world, you know, we've been on Umrah in Ramadan, you know, and even when you come outside of the Haram area, you still see that there's this atmosphere around being around Muslims, and that concept of brotherhood is there. It's, you know, and we've seen it outside of Ramadan as well. So I think being in a Muslim environment is definitely going to help. But I think the ultimate problem is, and this is what it comes down to, and we were, I think, and forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn for anyone here, but you know, definitely from my own example, is as we're growing up, our expectations on what ibadat is and what our responsibilities are quite low. You know, if we turn up for Jummah once a week, people are happy with that. The mosque is happy with that. Our parents are happy with that. You know, then Ramadan comes in, and you know, yeah, if you could get the rest of the prayers in, fine, but make sure you get Tarawih in, you know, and make sure you fast. So I think the expectations that people have been brought up with have been pretty low, and I think we've all got to take responsibility for this. And I think throughout the Muslim world, the expectation may be slightly higher, but they're not where they need to be. Whereas here, we're just in a worse situation. And you know what? I was reflecting on Ramadan. You know, when we entered the last 10 days, and you feel this sadness that Ramadan is ending. And then, you know what gave me, within a split second, you know, the emotion actually got high again, because we were saying, okay, Ramadan is ending, we're not going to get the benefits of it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us he's given us the night of power, so we've got another opportunity. And then, you know what, the night of power, then I was thinking, you know what, the night of power is going to come and go, we're never going to make the most of it, we can always we're always going to feel a bit of sadness that, regret that we never made the most of it. And then it's something that the Imam said at the mosque the other day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks highly of certain people. He talks highly of those who have got great taqwa. And then he talks highly of those who give to others, who forgive others. And, you could sit there thinking, what, that doesn't apply to me because I'm a bad person. But then Allah also talks highly of those who repent and those who turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the opportunities to return are always there. It's just that we get caught up in the day-to-day life, the day-to-day struggle, and this is all over the Muslim world. We get caught up in that day-to-day, whereas we think Ramadan is one of that time that we protect that time and we put the world aside and we worship Allah. But Allah tells us that actually the worship is in absolutely every action we do. And the way there is worship in that action is by referring it back to Him, and that doesn't stop during outside of Ramadan.
Yeah, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, isn't He, that every atom's weight of good and every atom's weight of bad will be, shown to you on the day of judgment. And obviously, that's not in reference to just in Ramadan. It's in reference to your entire life. And I think one quick point I want to make, and Rashan, I'll come to you, is that on the last podcast, which I recorded with Dr. Yaqub Ahmed about the Battle of Badr, that's just a quick plug if you want to check that episode out. That he mentioned a good thing a top point where he was talking about the change in Ramadan, but he said, look, this is a collective change, because even if you look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he addresses Muslims in the Qur'an, and I was thinking, let's look at the most basic example here. And the most basic example I could think of was Surah Fatiha, where you are praying as an individual. This is an individual action that you're doing. Obviously, if you're playing in Jama'ah, it's still individual, but there's a collective element to it. But still, what you're saying is, we, right? You're using the term we, not I. You alone, we worship, right? Guide us to the straight path. Now, you would think that the salah is between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here still, you're talking about us. You're not even talking about, when you're talking about guide us to a straight, you might be thinking of it as on an individual, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that connection you have, Allah guiding you on the straight path. But what you're doing is, you're not even just, this dua that you're making to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not even just for you as an individual, it's for you as an ummah, because you cannot be separated, right? And even the issue when we talk about the moon sign, I don't think we'll discuss it today, but when the order is to fast when you see it and to break the fast when you see it, as in when it's Eid and stuff. Again, if you look at the hadith, so you look at the Qur'an and stuff like that, it's always addressing the collective as an ummah. So if we want change and we restrict it to the individual, then unfortunately we've been affected by individualism. Because even 5 times a day, right, in salah, I don't know how many times it would be, because it depends if you pray sunnah or not. But the point I'm saying is that you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide the ummah to the straight path. It's not an individual dua, it's a collective dua. So this change that we want as in Ramadan, or when we talk about Ramadan should bring change, how can we restrict it to the individual? That's not possible. Rush over to you, bro.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that where Allah created us as social beings, we're not individual beings. You see, a lot of the depression and stuff you see in the world today, a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the Western world especially, is because, like you say, secularism, liberalism, these things kind of push you more towards a very individual lifestyle. Yes, you meet people at work and stuff like that, but outside of work, it's very much pushed towards keep yourself to yourself. Okay, you might go out the weekend and see your friends and family or whatever, but it is creating this very individual type of lifestyle. And when we talk about Ramadan, and I know you guys have mentioned it a little bit already, is that the environment is conducive for you to do more ibadah. Not just that though, it's like, because others are doing it, if you don't do it, you look out of place. So there is even an element that, it's motivating, even if you don't want to do it. Say you one day you don't want to go Taraweeh, or you're like, oh, I've just had too much iftar, I haven't had my coffee yet, I'm tired, I don't want to go. You've got the other people around you going, or you got your kids going, oh, Dad, I want to go to Taraweeh today or whatever. So there's the other elements that are pulling you towards ibadah. So you see there's that social element that pulls you towards ibadah. And I think the issue we have is because secularism has made us think that ibadah and worship is quite ritualistic, then Ramadan pulls us towards the ritual things. But, when we read about Badr just a few days ago, or, on the 17th, did we not think, well, we all knew that those people who were, on the plains of Badr, they were worshipping Allah a billion, zillion times more than we were when we were doing Taraweeh. That was ibadah, fighting in the path of Allah. That is the greatest ibadah. But
Raj, let me ask you a question then, bro.
Yeah.
It's elaborate on what you're saying then. Worship then, how should we understand worship?
Worship, we should understand worship as living by the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined for us. Yeah. And that is in every single action. As a human being, you interact with people. As a human being, you interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a human being, you interact with yourself. Those are relationships. And every single one of those relationships, if you do in accordance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is worship. So when you are praying your salah, you're communicating, you're interacting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's worship. When you are doing a trade with a brother, you're selling and buying, or you're working and you're receiving your salary and you're doing in halal means, your criteria is to do it in halal means. That's worship. You go somewhere and there's a non-mahram person and you lower your gaze and say you have to speak to them, and you stick to what you're allowed to speak about, or you eat what you're allowed to eat, because you're referring back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're referring back to the Qur'an, you're referring back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's worship. And I think people appreciate that because people do live their life based on halal and haram. But how much do we really think that that is worship too? And like the example of Badr that I was giving, all of those things, sometimes we don't really click and think all of those things are worship. We just kind of focus on the ritualistic side. And I think that's an effect of secularism, because it's trying to separate those two things. And that's not to say that we shouldn't do more ritual things in Ramadan. We should, because there's the environment for it. And we know the sheer volume of reward we get for doing it. But I think where we kind of miss out sometimes is, imagine if Badr, or fighting in the path of Allah, is the greatest ibadah. The fact today we can't liberate Palestine because the fighting cannot be done without there being a central Islamic government, Allah's Sharia being implemented, to liberate someone. I'm not talking about defending, because when you're defending, you're allowed to do that, regardless of the situation. But I'm talking about liberating Palestine as an example, just comparing it to Badr and talking about fighting in the path of Allah. If that is the greatest form of jihad, and therefore the greatest worship, then anything that leads up to bringing that back, surely that has to be a huge ibadah as well. And yes, okay, in Ramadan, it might be difficult to fit in your Taraweeh and all of these other things, but there has to be that introspection and reflection and go, wait there, I'm agitated by, again, what the Yahud are doing in Al-Aqsa again, like every year, again this year. But this year, I want to think about, what do I need to do that in the future, this isn't a problem? And that is ibadah too. And that's why I think all of those things need to come under that banner of ibadah. And then as an ummah, we'll progress forward, because we'll be looking at worship in the correct way.
Yeah, and the way you described it there, bro, is bang on, because we even see only recently there was a statement by some UAE official who was talking about how basically, you know, he wasn't even hiding it, that they're trying to implement secularism in that region. So here, what we're talking about there, what you said there, you know, in a very basic term, actually highlights the plane of the struggle, in the sense like it's that part of Islam that they want to remove from their lives of Muslims.
Definitely.
Which is what you're talking about, because you talked about jihad, for example, right? You can't liberate lands without this. But on top of that, there's another obligation which actually is so important, and nowadays it's become something which people don't even link it to worship, because they just think either it's the duty of somebody else, or they don't really put it into the category of salah and stuff like that, and that's enjoining the good, forbidding the evil.
Definitely.
You know, if we look at what Allah tells us, first of all, He tells us we're the best nation because we enjoy the good, forbid the evil. But there's many narrations, hadith, that talk about when people stop doing this and calamity befall them, and they raise their hands in dua, Allah will not accept their duas because they've stopped doing this. So if ideas like enjoying the good and forbidding the evil are not at the forefront of our minds, or are not seen as worship, in a way, not worship like that affects me daily, but actually enjoying the good, forbidding the evil, what is that? It does two things. It changes the situation, and it keeps the status quo as it is. So, for example, you forbid the evil, you've changed the condition from evil to good. And then when you're continuously doing this, you're keeping the good there, you're keeping the status quo as it is. How is it possible that we can expect any change, even on an individual basis, to be honest with you, because it depends on how you view change, but on an ummah level, without, for example, doing something like enjoying the good, forbidding the evil, which Allah actually says, Allah kind of puts it very high up in regards to Iman, in regards to this is something which is like the natural outcome of a Muslim to be doing. However, as going back to your point, Rash, how many of us view it as worship? How many of us, you know, think of what enjoying the good, forbidding the evil is?
Even what Ibn al-Qayyim says, we don't even intend to do it. That's what he highlights in that. So, you know, in that saying where he talks about Shaitan has glorified the recommended acts, in that he says, you don't enjoin the good and forbid the evil, not just that you don't do it, it's not even like you're not even intending to. It's not even like, okay, I'll do it after Ramadan, or like saying, you know, I'm too busy in Ramadan, I'll do it later. You know, it's the fact that you're not even going that, oh, it's an obligation that I'm avoiding or haven't got around to. Have you at least sat down and gone, you know what, let me prepare myself? Imagine, for example, you say, I don't have the knowledge to do it. Yeah. It's not an well, you should have the knowledge, but it's an excuse, say, for a second, or even if it's a prerequisite. Are you putting that prerequisite in place? Are you going, okay, fair enough, I don't have the knowledge to do it, I'm going to gain some knowledge, it's going to take me a year to gain some knowledge, and then I will start doing it? Are we even making that intention? Because if you just turn around and say, I haven't got the knowledge, that means you've all of a sudden said that Allah has put upon you a fard. As a capable human being, you can't do it. And we know Allah doesn't put obligations upon us that we are not capable of doing, unless they are, you know, unless we are not sane of mind or something like that. Then there's an exception. For us who, you know, have a sane mind, there's no exception. You can say, okay, I'm going to get some knowledge first and then I'll do it. But are we even doing that is the argument.
But that's my point, Rash. One my point here is the fact that there's not even that intention. There's not even that even consideration. It does not even come to your mind. So when we're talking about change, and obviously we're talking about today, Ramadan, the month of change, right? Yeah, you might change your eating habits. You might eat less, you know, like me, you might try to lose, you know, the spare tire around your waist, right? There's certain things, but if you're actually talking about real change in the ummah, real change actually for your akhirah, right? Then how is it possible for this to come about if things like enjoying the good, forbidding the evil does not even come into our minds? It's not even, you know, it would be impossible from what I believe.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think both of what you guys are saying is bang on. I think the bit that and I think it's changing, because if you think about what Rash said at the start, that certain mosques are talking about the lessons from the Qur'an, there is this recognition that, look, this Qur'an is not just to be recited. There's guidance in the Qur'an, as we've spoken about. This is our reference point. We need to look to the Qur'an for our guidance and what we need to be doing. And when we're reciting the words of Allah, a lot of it is a reminder, but also there are commandments in the Qur'an, what we need to be doing. Like you said, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil, believing in Islam. There's speaking about justice. There's so much in the Qur'an, and I wonder, and I don't understand the Qur'an. I don't understand Arabic. Here and there, you understand a few bits, and obviously you read the translation to get that understanding. But how is it that we can stand in Taraweeh for hours, listen to the words of Allah, but then not act upon those words, right? And when you think about what's happening in the world, not just in Palestine, which happens every year around, and we need to continually speak about this and not allow it to be desensitized just because it happens every year, but also in Kashmir, the fact that the Indians are being going through so much persecution in Ramadan, especially because the Hindutva see it as an opportunity, very much like the Zionists see it as an opportunity to really harm Muslims. And all throughout the Muslim Ummah, there's so much plight and calamity going on. How can we then just kind of separate ourselves from that? Going back to what Rash said about Badr, and the fact that they were the best of generations, and they viewed Ramadan as that month to now push forward, not in just the ibadah in terms of kind of Qur'an and Taraweeh, but also in the greatest of ibadah, which is jihad, right? Abu Bakr, during his time, he actually stopped the Taraweeh for jihad. He stopped the Taraweeh. So here's us, we make, and it's good, alhamdulillah. I think the point isn't one or the other. The point is, holistically, all of it is Islam. All of it is part of obeying Allah. All of it is وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. All of it is that Allah did not create man or jinn except to worship him. So if that's our purpose, how can it be that worship is only limited to the 5 daily salah, right? If that's our purpose, every single second of our being is worship, right? How is it? Does that mean we need to just constantly pray? No, we know that it's not. We can go and do other things. We can sleep. All of this can be worship, but we need to look at it as worship and recognize that every single action that we undertake needs to go back to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do, what he has prohibited us from doing, and the guidance of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for me, understanding worship like this is very important for us, because that is our purpose. End of the day, that is the thing that we will be accountable for on Yawm al-Qiyamah. I've been listening to this Day of Judgment series, and it really brings it to life that, this is going to be the ultimate day. None of this all of this matters, but for that day. So any action you're doing that doesn't lead or link to that day, or actually makes your situation worse during that day, what are we doing? Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the key point for me, that worship is this holistic view of worship. It includes the ibadah, it includes staying up all night, it includes looking for the night of Qadr, right? And what happened on the night of Qadr? Like, sometimes we need to reflect, what is it that makes Qadr worth 1,000 months? What happened? Why is it that the Qur'an was revealed, right? The guidance was revealed. 2 places in the Qur'an, Allah says this, that it was on this blessed day that it was revealed, right? In Ad-Dukan and Surah Qadr. So if it was the Qur'an that was revealed, and that is the reason Allah put so much magnitude on this night, the amount of reward that we all want to get, right? Why? Because Allah revealed a weighty word. That's why the night carries so much weight, right? So if we don't appreciate that weighty word, and it doesn't impact our lives, right? I know we've done a podcast on Qur'an, but I think it's worth reiterating. If it doesn't impact our lives and it doesn't really change us or transform us for the better after Ramadan, then we haven't really achieved what Ramadan is there to do, right? So I think, I just agreeing with what you guys are saying. Really.
Even the stuff about Badr, though, going back to what Afi's point was early on, if you look, you got to look at it from what people are doing. So, for example, if you look at the early generations, for them, the expectations were fighting jihad. The expectation was the mission of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they were doing this around the clock anyway. And in Ramadan, it gave them the extra boost of doing it. The taqwa was such a high level that they did things which, they took things to the next level. However, if we have a detached understanding of Islam and we link it just to the rituals, right, you'll see that the people, and it's just not an issue of sincerity, all the people are sincere. But what will they increase? They will increase those things which they view as Islam, which are those really ritualistic things. So by them increasing it is a good thing. But you can see that the level, what we're talking about here, is the level of the Ummah. And this is the reason why we may increase in the nawafila and the things that are recommended. However, in the past years, the Muslims, with that taqwa, that boost, the iman boost that they would have, they did things which, they probably would have done anyway, but they just took things on, which normally is that challenge in Ramadan. That challenge was there. And if you look at some of the great conquests, they were in Ramadan. People want to sit around watching the clock, or I was going to say that thing with the egg time. Also, I'm trying to say it's old times in it, but looking at the egg time and thinking how much of the days left. These mans were on a mission. But again, it goes to boils down that your understanding of Islam is important, how you carry it is important, and that will reflect what you up in the month of Ramadan. And if it's just rituals, then what we'll see is the ones who don't pray will start to pray, and the ones who do pray will increase their Taraweeh, their Tahajjud, which is all, alhamdulillah, a blessing. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through these actions, grant them Jannat al-Firdaus. But it's just a reality of where we are as an ummah. And even the issue about changing our condition, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, that He's not going to change the condition of a people until they change it themselves. And again, this is another example where if you look at this ayat, this is not talking about you as an individual. It talks about people. Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what's in themselves, right? So again, we tend to use this in a very individualistic way, but the reality is it's talking about collective. Again, if Ramadan is the month of change, as Dr. Yaqub said on my last podcast, how has the situation of the Ummah improved, right, as an Ummah during Ramadan and after Ramadan? If you just look at the situation, I mean, Ramadan's come and go, but if you're going to look at it from a world, like just from a bird's eye view of the Ummah, from a materialistic point of view, in the sense of like a worldly point of view, the situation hasn't become better. There's hunger, there's war, there's death, there's occupation. What the Yahud are doing now, they're upping the ante. They locked off the mosque, Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, for 3 days and all that. And if you see the videos, the mans were raving in there. I'm surprised they didn't bring out the strobe lights, right? But this is happening. So in one way, if you look at it, someone could argue, well, look, the situation is getting worse. But then wait a minute, we get this iman boost, this taqwa boost every year. It's like your MOT. We got an MOT, then we go through for MOT, right? But unless you got a dodgy mechanic, you hope that when your car comes out after the MOT, it's in a better condition than before they went in. What do you think, Rash?
I use a similar analogy in my khutbahs every year. I say that Ramadan is like a 30-day school that you go to, that you almost enroll in this school for a month. And if you come out of it and nothing changes, that means that school wasn't very good, because in 30 days, it wasn't able to teach you anything that you can take on to the rest of your year. But on top of that, the older you get, if you're like, say we're in our 40s, if we've been for 35 years or however many years we've been going to this school every year, yet our we haven't transformed in any way, then clearly we're not utilizing that month to the best of our ability. So I think that's important. And, another thing just to say is like, when I compare to Badr and stuff, I'm not saying that, our issue is that, we're not fighting and we're not trying to spread the deen and all. That was kind of not my point. I think my point is that, look, we need to recognize that there's all of these problems in the world. We're not going to solve the problems in the next 10 days in these last 10 days. Yeah, as JK talked about, the reason for the night of power being so significant is because the Qur'an was revealed. Our issue is we pick up the Qur'an in Ramadan and we focus on it. And then the problem is we put it back afterwards. But even when we focus on it, we don't focus on it for what it needs to be utilized for. The fact the likes of Badr and the likes of being able to liberate Palestine, those solutions are in the Qur'an. Those solutions are in the Qur'an. Yet, what we find ourselves doing every year is the same old things like, let's give charity for Al-Aqsa. Let's lobby the governments for Al-Aqsa. Let's sign these petitions. They've come round again. I've seen the petitions again. I've seen the lobbying again. I've seen those things. But that Qur'an that we're listening to every night and that night of power that we're seeking that night of power. And the reason it's so rewarding is because that transformed the world as we know it. So the Quran came down on that night. The entire Quran, by the way, the entire Quran came down on that night. And then after that, bit by bit, it was passed down to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we have to recognize that from that day, from that night of power, the whole world changed. We got rid of oppression. We got rid of poverty. We got rid of problems of wealth distribution. We got rid of riba. We spread the frontiers of Islam. We implemented Allah's deen. Why or how? Because of the Quran. Nothing else. Because of the Quran. It is the greatest miracle ever. You can compare it to all of the other miracles of all of the other prophets. The Quran is the greatest miracle of all of them because it didn't come to a people. It came to all of mankind. The Quran came to bring all of mankind out of darkness. But our issue is, and again, it's not issue, there's positive signs, and I'll mention one of them quickly in a second as well. There's positive signs, but what we just need to do is we need to keep going. We need to take it a step further. We need to get that Quran and go, actually, all of the tafsirs that the imams and all these really excellent YouTube videos where people are going through each juz and explaining things, they're talking about the munafiqeen, all of these lessons that we're gaining, let's bring them into our lives and let's go, actually, that's how we're going to work towards liberating Palestine. Yeah. And one of the positives is, and some people might not agree, I'm not sure, but I was quite pleased by the reaction to, when Mufti Menks was in that gathering. I'm not going to talk about judging him or anything like that. I was very pleased at people's reaction to it, because that means that the Muslim Ummah do not accept normalization. That means the Muslim Ummah have the scholars and the muftis and the imams at a very high level. If you drop below that level, then we will not be pleased with you. You need to do more. And I think that was the reaction. Even people who support him were saying, you know what, look, we hold you at a higher standard. You need to do better. And yes, okay, I was disappointed that, okay, he came out afterwards and apologized and stuff. And again, everybody has their restrictions. How amazing would it have been if he actually came out afterwards and said, look, and called out these normalizations, called out these rulers. Okay, Allahu Alam, no one knows what his situation is, and maybe it's difficult for him to do that. But at least the Ummah expected that of him. And that's a good sign, I think. That's a sign that the Ummah has progressed and it recognizes these two-state solutions, these Abraham Accords, and all of this rubbish is not how we're going to solve the situation in Palestine. And hopefully we will appreciate each year that the Quran is the only way we can solve these problems. And how do we get closer to that? And how do we solve it via that? Inshallah, I think that's positive personally.
I would say that there's a lot of positives. The one thing we don't want to do is make this podcasts aren't, all about doom and gloom. That's not the case. What we see is perfect example there. There was a reaction from people. Had that reaction not happened, would people have come out and apologized? Allahu Alam. But there's a reaction from people, so something was done. When what's happening in India, when you got this Modi going to these places in the Gulf and stuff, getting receiving medals and stuff, right? The people on the ground, they're unhappy about this. So what we're seeing is that generally the Ummah, right? They want change. They want change. They want the situation. They want to better the condition of the Ummah. I mean, you just see what's happening in Palestine and the messages that you receive on social media. The issue is though, what people have to understand, I think the important issue is how that change is going to arrive. And I think that whilst people want to change, I think there are devious elements at play, which then divert that effort or that understanding of how to bring about change. They either will make it something which is individual, okay? It can only happen with dua, or people will go down different routes, whether it's, lobbying your MP and stuff like that. So the positives there, and even if you have a Muslim who is a not good Muslim, he drinks alcohol, he doesn't pray and stuff like that, right? He fornicates. You ask him and you ask him, would you want your children to do the same? He'll say never, right? I'm gonna send them to the best madrasas. Why? Because Muslims want change. We want that connection with our Lord. However, what needs to happen though is that we do have a responsibility where we can't just follow blindly without assessing that. Actually, wait a minute. We have the qunut every Ramadan. We have all these things that happen, but actually, the situation hasn't changed. In certain places, getting worse. What are we doing wrong? What is it? Allah tells us that, He's the one who changed our condition, right? Victories from Him. However, we have to meet certain requirements for that victory to come. What are those requirements? What are we doing wrong? We're the ummatis of the best of mankind. Why are we going through this? Why are the Muslims in Palestine going through this? Or what, insan, this should drive us to think about, where's my role in this? And I think that's what this podcast is about, really. It's about we need to hold people to account. People shouldn't be, people that we see as those of influence, they shouldn't be able to sit with normalizers. They shouldn't be able to do these things. In fact, they should be driving this change. And I think that's my point. There's a lot of positives out there, man. I'm not the one of those doom and gloomers that, the Ummah is like, their judgment's around the corner because the Ummah is so bad. That's not the case, right? There's good in the Ummah. The Prophet ﷺ said this. But I think, this is where we need to think about it. And one point, JK, I'll bring it to you, man, because I know we were chatting about this. Maybe you want to shed some light on it. When you look at how people respond and you look at how Muslims are responding, just say, to the issue of Palestine. And okay, it's not like for like, but look at the response to like Ukraine. It's different, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's something that's really like a silver lining from some of this stuff. Like, it's sad what's happening with innocent people in Ukraine as well in terms of Russia's bombardment and stuff. But what you can see very clearly from the West, and again, it goes back to double standards, you could call it hypocrisy, you could call it, but there's one element of hypocrisy in terms of, okay, media coverage and stuff, but look, we expect this. I'm not really going to expect them to cover Palestine. They never have, and they never will, really. They don't view it like that. But one thing we can learn from is that when it came to Ukraine, right, they were calling for solutions that they genuinely thought would change the situation. So, right, they didn't make it a humanitarian effort to collect lots of charity, and yeah, there might have been a bit of that, but actually the focus was on how we're going to change the situation, how we're going to stop Putin, right? So it was about helping with military aid of Ukraine. Even when Germany sent those helmets, right, they got criticized, even though that's actually physical, right? That's something that will help, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't sufficient. The UK government, they got criticized that they're not doing enough to help Ukraine militarily, right? So in the light of this, right, if that is their reaction to Ukraine, right, why is it that we settle for less for Palestine or other lands that are being oppressed? Why do we settle for dua and giving some charity in a bucket, doing a car wash for Palestine, whatever it may be, right? Why do we settle for that when we know that actually that isn't a humanitarian problem? It's not a problem caused by a natural disaster where people temporarily need some sort of monetary aid, right? It's not. It's a political issue caused by, these scum, really, these occupiers who have been given permission to do this, and made more brazen by support from the West. That's the issue, right? So why is it that when they are calling for military aid for Ukraine, because that's going to solve the situation, but when it comes to Palestine, we don't recognize that? Or we do, maybe we do, but we don't do enough to really push for that solution. And that also falls in line with Islam, right? And that's the main thing, really. What does Islam require us to do? And it's a military reaction to remove the occupiers. Us just giving money that we've done year on year on year, millions, if not billions, we've raised for Palestine, right? Mm. What has that actually changed? Honestly, what has it changed? Right? Nothing. And if you listen to the Palestinian Muslim brothers and sisters, when they're calling for support, what are they calling to? They're calling out the rulers.
Really,
now, I watched a video of a sister shouting out, Arab. Yeah, calling them out. So they don't want money. They don't want our money, really. They don't. They want support, physical support to change the situation. And that is what we need to do. Yes, obviously, I know that we need an authority to have a permanent change for all our situation. But actually, even the temporary situation we're in now, there's a lot those who have influence can do to help the Palestinians to stop the Zionists from what they're doing, really. And it's not enough, right? And that's where, as Rashan, you guys were saying as well, that I know there's positivity in the Ummah. There is definitely. We want change to happen, and you can see that, right? But we really need to channel our anger, channel our frustrations into the right course of action to change the situation for better, and not just for ourselves, but for the Ummah at large.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is we're talking about change, aren't we? It's not, I'm sure, the brothers and sisters, and I mean, we just use an example of Palestine because it's quite current. I'm sure when they do receive, I mean, in Gaza, for example, when they receive humanitarian aid, I'm sure they appreciate that, and I think the advantage of that is the fact that they know they're not alone. They know that the people, the Ummah is in their hearts, and they're in the hearts of the Ummah, right? They know who the criminals are. It's these leaders, right? But relief and change is two different things. Relief and change is two different things. And when we talk about change, this has to be comprehensive. There has to be a change, complete change. And the thing is, yes, there's nothing stopping you from helping your fellow Muslim brothers and relieving them of their immediate problems. But if we're not discussing what will bring the change, then we will continue doing this forever. And it could well be that change can't happen today, right now. But speaking about it, it will get you to that stage where you can do something about it. I mean, one example that I quickly will use is that, when you look at the Messenger Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and you see when he was in Mecca, and in Mecca, when people sometimes want to give an impression like, just turn the cheek and just, don't worry about things, just, worry about yourself. Look at the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in Mecca. He had the Kaaba was full of idols. He had people doing the tawaf naked. He had cheating. He had all these things, the baby girls being buried. All these things were happening. He never tried to stop them. But what I would say to that is, astaghfirullah, for anyone to think that the Prophet ﷺ ignored these things. He didn't ignore these things. He was on a divine method. He was following a divine method. And we see that once he had that capability, he was able to, on the 20th of Ramadan, to march onto Mecca with the 10,000 man army and destroy the idols and stop these ill practices, right? But what people don't forget is it takes time and it takes effort, but you need to be working towards the right thing though. And that's the worry I have. And because some people say, oh, you mentioned jihad, but you can't do that today, which, these armies, they're actually serving American agenda. Okay, nobody's expecting them to do something right now, this moment. But if you're not calling out those people who are capable of doing it, then we might as well, forget about it. Just turn on the news and look how the settlers, how they're humiliating our brothers and sisters.
And the thing is, like, we shouldn't belittle the power of the people, right? So we might say, yeah, but what can I do? The leaders are like this, right? Yes, the leaders are like that, we know, right? But the change happens through people, right? If enough people call for change and do the required actions, change will occur, right? So it's easy for us to be like, just sit back and be like, okay, I'll just do the bare minimum, dua, charity, whatever, right? But actually, when the fundamental change isn't in the leader or whoever's there, it's actually through the people. If the people call it out collectively as a ummah, 1.6 billion of us, call it out and actually take action, the change will occur, right? But we have to take our responsibility as well. It's not just leaving it on those who have positions of power is not sufficient. The Messenger of Islam didn't do this. They collectively worked as a group. The Ansar supported as a people. They weren't powerful. They weren't powerful people in the Arabian Peninsula, but they worked collectively together to create this situation. And then when it came to the right time, they conquered Mecca. They liberated Mecca, right? So we have to view it the same way. I think it's very easy to really just lay the blame on others, right? But all of us, including myself, we need to think about what do we need to do in this situation, do our bit. And even if it doesn't happen, it might not happen in my lifetime. I pray it does, but Palestine still might not be liberated in my lifetime. But at least I can say to myself, okay, I did what I did to the best of my ability, right? And genuinely best of my ability, not just tick box, I gave some money. Genuinely what was in the best of my ability, and I did that. I think that's the important thing we need to realize. And I think there are people that do realize that, but collectively, together, if we do that, that's when Allah will change our condition, as he says in the ayah you mentioned.
Yeah, not exactly. And I think what's important is for people listening not to think that we are here criticizing the ummah as such. We are part of this ummah. If we're talking to people, we talk to ourselves first and foremost. But the main point is, though, we have to have the desire to do the right thing. I think that's important. It may well be that it takes longer. It may well be. I mean, an example would be, just say, your lawn, right? Your lawn, and you were going to, mow the lawn, but with some scissors, right? Now, the thing is that it's going to take time for you to get the job done. It's going to be bit by bit, but at least you are working towards what your objective is. Now, the other option is that what could happen is a windy day, wind comes and blows, this side to that side, this side, and it looks like, whoa, something's happening here. It looks like something's happening here. But once that storm goes away, you're still in the same situation, right? So I think what we have to understand is, as Muslims, what we tend to do as human beings, shall I say, we gauge things based on emotion. Like, yeah, but what about in the meantime? Yeah, but what about this? And yeah, but what about that? And and the problem is that that's normal. That's human nature. However, we have the Sharia, we have the Qur'an and the Sunnah, we have the perfect example, the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's what we need to be looking towards. We see at the time, as an example, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Many of the companions were confused. What just happened here, right? Because they couldn't understand. They couldn't understand. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He explained afterwards that this was the messenger did this because he was guided to do this. The whole thing, right? So we can't fall into that same mistake, or not mistake as such, but that false assumption that, wait a minute, what's going on here? If the hadith and the Quran are pointing towards what needs to be done, our emotions can't take priority to think, well, yeah, I know what you're saying. I know it's right. I know Allah's commanding this, but that but shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? But it is there. And that's why I think it's important just to reflect as for myself, for you guys, just as an ummah. Ramadan is the month of change. Let's, reflect on this, but as a collective, because remember, what you're going to understand is that, if the ummah is changing, then the ummah is going to change. That's going to have an effect on you as an individual as well, right? Let's think about our kids. Let's think about the future ahead. Things like the affairs of the Ummah, Palestine, all these things. We should speak to the kids about this. They should be aware of this, because if it's not us, it'll be them that brings this change about. You understand? Sure. But what's important, and what I always say, I mean, I speak to some people, and some Muslim brothers, and they have this like agitation when they hear the word Khilafah, for example, right? And they say, well, you know what? Yeah, but there's so many other things that need to happen before that. And I don't disagree with that. That things have to change before that's going to come. Before Khilafah comes, things will change. But at least talk about it in the masjids. At least talk about what Khilafah is. Talk about that we want that to happen one day. We want to get to it. To completely not mention it at all. Because, yeah, we're not at that level. Yeah, but if you don't talk about it, how can people even aspire to get to that level? You understand? So that's why when we talk about change, man, whether it's us, whether it's the next generation or it's the generation after, we don't know. But what we do know is Allah says that, if people don't do what they're told to do, then He will change them for better people. And I would like to think that even though we don't see it in our lifetime, but we were on the right lines. We were going down the right path. We're not one of those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about there, who, Allah sort of shunned and brought better people about because they weren't doing what they were meant to be doing. So guys, we've spoken about a lot, man, and I think it's good to sort of like bring our thoughts together. Maybe get your final thoughts. Ramadan, the month of change, we spoke about change as individuals, change as the ummah, restore the izzah, the honor of the ummah. And yeah, we spoke about a lot, man, and I think it's really important for everyone to take these things away, or at least entertain them, at least think about it. Those guys there, those 4 guys talking on the podcast, were they making sense, or were they just waffling? You know what I mean? At least give us that opportunity to think and ponder whether we spoke the truth. But bro, Rash, inshallah, I'm gonna come to you, bro, first, and maybe just get your final thoughts. And like I said, they don't need to be quick, take as long as you want, but let's change towards the end of the podcast. Yeah,
inshallah. Yeah, I think initially the good thing to do is, like we said at the beginning about, if we're going to go into Ramadan, we have these plans, don't we? How much we're going to recite and how much good deeds we're going to do. I think it's important towards the end, like last 5-6 days or whatever it is, at least now go, what can I take from Ramadan and continue it? So just, highlight certain things and go, okay, what can I continue to do? Because no doubt you're not going to be able to continue all of it. There isn't even Taraweeh to go, to be able to continue that. So clearly there's less from what you've been doing in Ramadan, but it'd be great to just say, there's few things that I did. So for example, maybe I watched more Islamic videos on YouTube to learn a bit more, because I avoided maybe videos about football. I'll take a simple example. Maybe I watched a few too many videos about certain football club on YouTube before, and then in Ramadan I was like, okay, I'm going to do less of that and I listened to some more. So I came across Uthman ibn Farouk, the one, that he was stabbed, wasn't he? Yeah. After that I thought, I'll watch a few more of his videos, and some of them are brilliant.
The debates are brilliant, man.
Debates are fantastic. So all of a sudden it's like, actually, why waste my time on things that are not going to be of any value in this life or the next life? Then watch something that I can gain a bit more value from. So I'm going to certainly try to take some of that away. No doubt reading more of the Qur'an, but with meaning, so that I can at least contemplate, what the change needs to look like and how. So I think that's my message to myself first and foremost, is what can I take from these days of Ramadan and continue to do afterwards. But then my second little message is that it's what you were saying before, is that change isn't going to happen overnight, and change might even not happen through us. But if we are not ones that pass down that message to our children and pass it to other people, then Allah's already promised victory. Victory comes through the armies of Allah. And sometimes when we say armies of Allah, we might think that that's like the battle of jihad and things. It's not. Anybody can be in the army of Allah. Even the non-Muslims, in the way that they're decaying, they're actually contributing to Allah's plan. As the West decays through their liberalism, through their decadence and all of these things, that's part of Allah's plan. That's going to lead to their destruction. But the problem we have sometimes is that, it's toing and froing. What happens is when the Muslims kind of get a bit of a boost, the kuffar go, what, we need to suppress that. And then the Muslims go, okay, now we need to compete, be it prevent, be it whatever, there's always a bit of toing and froing. And I think people sometimes get fatalistic because they see revival as this. It's just going in one direction. Yeah. And okay, that's what revival is like, upward trajectory. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some plateauing and some declining. But what's the beauty of it is, take a step back. If you look at it from a further out, the overall trajectory is this way. Yeah, it's overall, it's revival. But if you look at it if you zoom in on it, you might zoom into a bit which looks like it's going down or is plateaued, but that makes us fatalistic and makes us get depressed and get upset. We shouldn't look at it that way. At the end of the day, we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on our sides. Overall, the revival is in the right direction, and we need to understand how we are part of that. So some of the things I've done this Ramadan, I'm taking it away, is also part of that. Because if I improve myself and then spread that to other people, and they do the same, then that's going to have a positive effect. So I think that's what I will be doing, inshallah. And I think maybe others can benefit from that as well.
Yeah, no, great points, bro. Great points. After.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Muslims around you and then you spend time with talking with them at the mosque, I think Muslims as a whole understand that Islam puts responsibility on each and every one of us in certain aspects, with what we do with our wealth, what we do as a result of our actions. They also understand that we are an ummah, we are a specific ummah, and we are united, and I've got responsibility towards my brothers and sisters. And ultimately, I've got to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered me to do. And I think these basics, if we want to put it that way, people understand that. And I think the Ummah does have very strong emotions with these issues. And that's why it's easy to get them swayed in one direction to the other. I mean, that's why, they will wholeheartedly give to causes like Syria and Yemen. And I've been seeing this in the mosque in the last few weeks. Every week there's a different cause. And this is because Muslims feel the problem, and they generate a lot of money because people feel the problems. And I think using that as a starting point, and then thinking about how Ramadan comes into it. And I think something like Rash was saying, at the start of Ramadan, we all reflect on, I'm going to do this, this, this. We have a vision in mind about how we are going to improve ourselves, because we know what our starting point is. And I think it's really, really important that as individuals, wherever we are, whatever level of understanding we have to make this bit about improvement our sole cause, which is, what is that improvement? And that improvement is doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us to do. Let's not go into the details of what that is, because this is going to be different for everyone based upon where they are with regards to this journey, if you want to put it in that way. But we make that aspect our starting point, that I want to improve as a person by doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered me to do in order to attain his pleasure. Then you will go on a journey of improvement, and you will constantly look for your answers in life. You may come across an answer, you may not be happy with it. You will go out and extend and say, look, this isn't achieving what Allah has ordered me to do. Allah has ordered us for the liberation of Muslim lands. It isn't happening. I'm giving money. It isn't happening. How do I fulfill this command? And you will constantly go on that road of improvement, and you won't stop. And we got examples from history. The story of Salman ibn Farsi, who came from a very strong household. Very, they were well off. He had power. He had money. But he went on the mission of truth, where he traveled the world. He got taken as a slave. He got himself out of slavery to go to find Muhammad ﷺ, because he heard from a Christian, ironically, that there will come a prophet from amongst the Arabs who will be, he won't take sadaqah for himself. And then when he came across Muhammad ﷺ, he realized this was the truth. Despite what they were telling him about Christianity, he embraced Islam. So this is lessons that we can take, that once you constantly strive for the truth and to improve yourself in relation to that truth, we will come to the answers. We won't be led astray. We won't be taken for fools. But we have to first embrace that ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. The design needs to be there, isn't it? 100%. JK, bro.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for that, Afi and Rash. I think very, things to think about and reflect on moving forward. For me, I think just moving back to the start of the podcast, when we spoke about the fact that the blessed month is coming to an end, and the fact that it's gone so quickly, and we're literally at the last week or so. The saying of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes to mind, where he said that the results of deeds are dependent on their endings, meaning that it's better to have a better end to Ramadan than to have a better beginning and not a so good end, right? It's the result of deeds are dependent on their endings, right? And this is for Ramadan, in the sense that we should really be upping our efforts at the last few days of Ramadan. Obviously, we're looking for the night of Qadr, so we should be upping our efforts anyway for that. But it's also coming to the end of the blessed month, where the barakah will also come to an end, and shaitan will also be unlocked. So there's various reasons why we should be really upping our efforts in all those actions that we spoke about, not just the ibadah, but also the enjoining of the good and forbidding the evil, the dawah efforts, speaking about the injustices that's happening around the world. All of those efforts we need to be doing, talking about the correct action we need to be doing to change our situation. All of that we need to be upping that right now at the end of Ramadan. But also, this statement of the best of deeds are judged on their endings is also in reflection of life, right? We don't have that much time, right? Life isn't that long, right? All of us are getting older. Who knows whether we will see another Ramadan? I know people, and it dawned upon me that there's people that were here last Ramadan that are not here anymore. So, and that scares me. Because it's like, subhanAllah, like sometimes you feel like your life's so long, and I'm not as old as you guys, but anytime we could go, right? Anytime, right? It could even be a minute after this podcast, right? So reflecting on that, we need to recognize that our life is short, right? And we want a good ending. We want an ending where the one who has sinned his whole life, right? But in the end, he returned to Allah and repented, and Allah forgave him, and he did his commandments and he stayed away from Allah. He has a better situation on Yawm al-Qiyamah than the one who did all the good and then ended in disobedience, right? But the other thing, just to end my point, is when this is a month of forgiveness, right? We talk about seeking forgiveness. Even the dua that is encourages, Allahumma innaka afuwan tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. Allah loves to forgive, so forgive us, Allah. And we pray that Allah does forgive us, right? But we need to reflect on what are we asking for forgiveness on, right? So often it's about those individual sins we may have done, and we will have done with our hands, our body, our eyes, whatever it may be, right? We would have done, right? But also we need to think about all those sins that we don't know about, right? So when you read the Qur'an, and Allah has commanded all of these things that we should be doing, but we're not doing. When you think about all those who are suffering, calling for our help, but we're not responding. These are all sins that will be counted for us, right? And we want to be one of those on Yawm al-Qiyamah. When we get there, we have secret reward that we never knew about, and it was a mountain of good reward, and it helped us on the Day of Judgment. And we certainly don't want to be of those people who went to the Day of Judgment thinking, we've done well, I've prayed, my salah, I've done this, but we had a mountain of sin because we didn't know all the sins we were committing. that we just weren't aware of, right? So I think one of the signs of sincerity in seeking forgiveness from Allah is that we recognize what the sin is and we don't return to that sin. And we do, so if there's a commandment we haven't been doing, we go out and take corrective action to do what Allah has required from us. That's a sincere dua for forgiveness, right? So we should ask for that. And I think, you know, we need to ask ourselves, what are those things that we need to be doing that we haven't been doing collectively as an ummah, and as individuals, so that Allah does forgives us, and also leads us to have a good ending, both in this life and on that day where it matters, where inshallah we will be entered into Jannah and we are saved from the fire.
I mean, no, exactly, bro, exactly. And yeah, some strong points, bro, some strong points from all of you guys, really. The only thing I would say is that just, you know, we probably sound like as if it's the 29th of Ramadan. Today it isn't. There's still plenty to work for. You know, so if people are listening to this today, you know, still got at least over a week, could be, you know, the night of power. If it's not already happened, it's there. The opportunity is there. So, you know, let's not let up. As the, you know, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah said, you know, the racehorse, he, you know, puts his effort in, you know, right at the end when he sees the finishing line, and that's how we should see it. And in regards to the topic of change, I think what's important, brothers and sisters, is it can easily seem daunting that, yeah, these guys are talking, yeah, they're making a bit of sense, but what can I do? What, you know, I'm just one person, you know, I'm not even in some of these areas, you know, what can I do? I think first and foremost, and this sort of like is built on Afi's point, you have to have the desire. You have to have the desire, the interest that I need to do something. It can't just be like this. You know, I need to do something. And then, you know, from there, then Allah will make your journey easy. He will take you to those who understand or whatever and guide you to, you know, the knowledge, the solutions. But what's important is the desire has to be there for change. The desire has to be there for change. It's not enough to acknowledge there's a problem, right? You have to acknowledge that it needs to be changed, but also how does it need to be changed and what part do I play in that? And I think that's, you know, if anything you take from this podcast is that every single Muslim should, you know, take a bit of time out today, or, you know, after you listen to this podcast maybe, and just, you know, in isolation, just reflect for 5 minutes even, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us in the Qur'an as an ummah. We are an ummah. The Prophet ﷺ said we're like one body, right? How does my life reflect these ayat and these hadith? You know, what am I doing to change in my capacity, whatever it is, however small it is, however big it is, right? And then just take it from there. I think what's important is, if anything, is change is the desire. If you think about it, what can I do? Then unfortunately you won't do anything, right? But if the change is there, you know, what does the world show, man? What does history show? You know, look at Badr, as Rash brought up earlier. You know, the Quraysh came there to party for 3 days, right? They never expected to get beaten. When the Muslims turned up, you know, the doorsteps of the great Persian Empire, you know, they were like, oh, these guys, you know, they want to raid. They're just economic migrants, you know what I mean, right? Let's send them to Rwanda. Obviously, they didn't think that. But the point is, though, is they were like, what do you want? You know what I mean? You know, we're, you know, an empire that's been around for thousands of years, man. We got heritage, we got history. What do you want? You know what I mean? They never expected that to happen. But it all happened because there was a desire. There was a desire, and nothing can happen without that desire. And where does that desire come from? It comes from our Aqidah, it comes from the Qur'an and Sunnah, and it comes from ultimately having that intention of pleasing your Lord. And wherever that takes you, whatever that takes you on that journey, we should be willing and happy to go down that route. And that's what it's about. So guys, inshallah, let's bring this podcast to a close. Jazakallah khair to my lovely co-hosts. once again, month of Ramadan, we did 4 podcasts, recorded 4 podcasts. Alhamdulillah, that in itself is hopefully, a blessing, and maybe, and hopefully, inshallah, on the day when it really matters, that, this type of activity can tilt the scales in our favor. Inshallah ta'ala, that's the hope. And I hope that, everyone listening or watching this has benefited from this episode, but not just this episode, from the previous 3 in the month of Ramadan. And inshallah ta'ala, we can move forward and upwards, inshallah ta'ala, and, work for bettering our situation. So on that note, my brothers, inshallah ta'ala, jazakallah khair, and I will see you on the next podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.